Hey everyone, Ace of Clay here and welcome to another video. If you are new here, I'm a sculptor and every week I make a new sculpture. Today's video is the 5th episode of Sculpt This, where I sculpt a subscriber's illustration. Do you like my new logo and animation? Quick shout out to Liam and Jord for designing it for me. If you need a logo or identity system, seriously check them out. They do incredible work. You can find them on Instagram at Liam and Jord, so be sure to stop by and tell them Ace of Clay sent you. Alright, now back to Sculpt This. Today I will be sculpting this awesome character created by Snackodile. He's a little gnome guy created for DND, and I will tell you more about him in a sec. If you would like a chance for me to sculpt your drawings in a future episode of Sculpt This, just share them to Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter with the hashtag SculptThis Ace of Clay and you're entered. There is no deadline. And lastly, be sure to check out my Facebook group Aces of Clay. We're almost at 4,000 members and we would love for you to join. Now without further ado, let's sculpt this. Alright, before we get started, let's take another look at that drawing. This is Felkrin. He's a gnome druid designed by Snackodile for a D&D campaign. He likes to try and swindle players out of their food, especially apples, in exchange for helpful info. He's basically a funny little old man and a friend to some pixies. Okay, let's get this guy started. For the first step, I just drilled 2 holes into this wooden plaque. This is going to be his base. Then I'm inserting some bamboo skewers for his legs. And now I'm going to take the skewers and wrap some wire around them to form the torso and shoulders. And then as always, all of the materials and tools that I use in this video are listed in the description box below, along with my affiliate links if you want to purchase anything. Then once the torso is figured out and both sides are twisted on, I'm just adding the arms as another separate piece of wire, attaching those to the shoulders with some floral wire, and then I'm going to take some SCULPT Ultralight to bulk out his torso. We're not using aluminum foil for this guy. One great thing about SCULPT Ultralight is that it won't crack in large pieces. I'm not sure how large you can go with it, but for this guy, he's so small, I decided to trade it out with the aluminum foil this time. And once the torso is roughed out, we're just going to add a bamboo skewer for the neck, trim that to size, and then we are going to bake this. And then once it's baked and completely cooled down, we're going to start adding some Super Sculpey. And then to cover the legs, I'm just going to do the part where his skin is exposed, so I just rolled out a snake of clay and I'm just pressing that onto the skewer like this, and shaping it out. Nice skinny little ankles. Once that's looking pretty good, I just have this other larger snake of clay to start his shorts, and I'm cutting it vertically but not going all the way through, just to make it easier for me to add it to his legs. Once the shorts are at a good point, it's time to start adding some long snakes of clay to create some folds and wrinkles. Just adding the snake of clay like so, and then blending the edges in with everything else. Then I'm just going to repeat this process over and over until the shorts look how I want. Now that we're done with the shorts, I'm just going to trim this little thin piece of clay, wrap it around his waist, and this is going to create the bottom of his shirt. I'm just sort of measuring it, making sure it's the right size, and then I'm going to blend the top edge in with the rest of his stomach, like that. And that looks okay, but I kind of want a couple more ripples in it, so I'm just going to take this piece off and fold it, and then reattach it. Alright, not bad. The bottom of his shirt is done. Now we're just going to bring out his stomach a little bit more with some more clay. And now it's time to start the belt. I'm going to start with the fur part, which is going to go on first, and I just cut this out of a thin piece of clay. I'm adding it like so, and then I'm going to texture it to look like fur. Once the fur is looking good, I'm just going to add the leather part of the belt, like so, wrap it around. Press it in, make sure it's nice and secure, and then I'm going to add the stitching. Now for the next step, we're just going to create the little bag that he has attached to his belt. It's just a little rectangle piece of clay, added the little flap, and I'm going to secure it with some bacon bond. Very nice. Now for the next step, I'm just going to take my cone color shaper to indent some little wrinkles around his waist. Now I'm going to start the line in the front where the two halves of his shirt meet in the front, and that's a little too far to the one side, so we're going to move it over a little bit, but I still don't like it. We're going to do the snake of clay method instead. Add this and then blend the one edge in with everything else. Once that's looking good, I'm just going to start adding the buttons. Now for the little strap that's wrapped around the buttons. Alright, so far so good. Let's keep going. We're gonna make his feet next. His tiny little gnome feet. Just gonna shape them out in my hands, add them like so. And then we're going to create little tiny balls of clay for the toes. Now we're just blending the one side of each ball in with the rest of his foot. Now we're just going to brush the entire surface with clay softener to remove fingerprints and get him ready for another bake. Then once he's baked and completely cooled down, see how he looks, and let's start the staff. To do this, I'm just using some 12 gauge aluminum wire, bending it into the shape of the staff, like so, trimming it to size, making sure it's the right height. And then I'm going to add a very long snake of clay on top of this, and then wrap it around the other side. Then once all the clay has been added, we're just going to blend it out as smooth as possible, and then follow this step with a nice wood grain texture. And then really quick, because I know I'm going to get it in the comments, I did not make the little pixie on the top of his staff, and I apologize for that. I just simply ran out of time this week. Then once that's done, for the little tiny branches with leaves, I'm just adding a little bit of floral wire to the clay like that, and then I also reinforce it with some bacon bond as well. Then we're just going to wrap the staff with some fabric and get this thing ready to bake. We will add the leaves later. And once that's baking, let's work on his arms. We're just going to bend the wire into its final position and then add some clay. Once that arm's looking pretty good, we're going to add a little snake of clay to create the sleeve. And then we're going to add another snake of clay to create some wrinkles. And we're going to repeat this process for the other arm. Now we're going to start the head. I'm just shaping out the core from some aluminum foil. Then I'm going to cover this in clay and add a skewer. Now I'm going to take my large ball stylus to press out his eye sockets. And then I'm going to use another technique to create his eyes today. I'm just going to add this little ball of clay, sort of flatten it out, and then rock this tool back and forth, starting at the tear duct and moving to the end of the eye, and then repeating it on the other side, just to create the eye and the eyelids simultaneously. And once you get the hang of doing this, it's super easy and super effective. Then once the eyes are done, we're just going to add another piece of clay for his chin and jaw. Then we're going to bring out his cheekbones a little bit. And now I'm going to go in with my cone color shaper to create some wrinkles. Then once his eyes and cheeks are at a good point, we're going to start pressing out his mouth. This guy's mouth is open, so we're just pressing out that shape and then using a couple different tools to remove the extra clay that's inside, and we're just sort of pressing out the tongue as we go. And believe it or not, it worked. Now for the next step, we're just going to add this other piece of clay for his nose, and then I'm just blending it in with my spoon tool, and my medium ball stylus is going to help me shape it out. And then for the nostrils, I've added 2 small balls of clay to each side of his nose, and I am blending them in with my cone color shaper. Once the nose is at a good point, it's time to add his teeth. And now you're probably wondering, why are you jamming your pin tool into this completed face? Well, this is because I'm making holes for some aluminum wire that's going to act as the armature for his oversized mustache. And I added some for his hair too. What am I even doing here? Alright, but now before we bake this, I'm just going to add his eyebrows. More like before I forget. Just texture those really quick. And then to his ears, I poked some toothpicks into the sides of his head, and then I'm adding the clay on top of those. Then once I'm satisfied with everything, I'm just going to brush the surface with clay softener to remove fingerprints and get him ready for another bake. Then once his head's baked and completely cooled down, I'm just going to start shaping out that wire like so, being careful not to crack his face or pull the wire out. Then once that's at the shape that I want, I'm just going to add some clay for the mustache. Then to heighten the hair texture and have it match the illustration as much as possible, I'm adding these snakes of clay that taper at each end to the mustache surface, and I'm blending one side in with the rest of it, and this is giving it a nice bumpy furry texture. Then to finish it off, I'm going in with my Explorer tool to add some more details. Then after brushing with clay softener to remove fingerprints, it's time to bake him again. Then once that's baked and completely cooled down, we're bulking out his hair with some Sculpting Ultralight. I think this is the most pre-bakes I've ever done on a sculpture. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then once the underlying structure for his hair has been established, we're going to bake this again. Then once it's cooled down, we're going to add some Sculpting on top of that. And then I'm following this step by adding some sort of fat snakes of clay that taper to the surface just like we did with the mustache, but just on a slightly larger scale. We're just going to cover his entire head with these. And then we're going to add texture to him, just like we did with the mustache too, with our Explorer tool. Then once the hair is done, let's bake him again. Then while that's baking, we're going to make the leaves for the tiny little branches on his staff. And basically I'm just cutting these out from paper, and I'm going to attach them to the branches with Mod Podge. And am I the only one that thought it was Mod Podge? Because I was just recently informed that it was Mod Podge. I kind of like Mod Podge better, but whatever. Anyway, just added a nice little collar to his shirt. Cut out the shape for his cape, and I'm attaching it with some Bacon Bond, of course, like that. And then we're just going to create the pieces that go over his shoulders into the front, where it sort of clips in the middle. Add some little stretch marks with my cone color shaper. Then add his little brooch thing in the front. Then attach his head with some bacon bond. Then we are going to add his staff finally by wrapping the excess wire in his arm around it. Make his hand and then attach it on top of the wire. Then the last thing we have to sculpt is this little accessory that he's got hanging from his belt. Not sure what it is. Is it an orb? Is it a potion? Not sure. But then once he's baked and finally cooled down for the last time, it's time to paint him. All of the paints that I use in this video are Folk Art brand matte acrylics. And I'm just starting with his skin color using this beige tone. And then to create this nice pink tone, I just mixed some Imperial Red with that beige color, and I'm dry brushing it on the tip of his nose, his ears, his lips, and a little bit on his forehead. Now I'm using a fine paintbrush to paint the inside of his mouth black, painting the whites of his eyes warm white, and then following that with his teeth. Then I'm going to use some black for his irises, and then add a nice little shine reflection to the corner of each one. Really bring him to life. And then paint his tongue. And then for his hair, I'm going in with a nice base coat of the color Boulder. And once the base coat is dry, I'm just going to dry brush some pure magenta into some of the crevices just to kind of create that nice magical lit color that's in the illustration. Then I do the same thing with some light blue, and then I follow that with some dry brushing of warm white. And I've had a lot of people ask me, what is dry brushing? Like, how do you make it look so easy? And it's really not that hard to do. It's really up to the texture that you are dry brushing to determine how good it looks when it's done, because all you're doing is just heightening details that are already there. But basically all it is just taking a very little amount of paint on your paintbrush, like brush it against a piece of paper like I do, or some other surface before you put it on your figure, and then just quickly swipe it back and forth until you get the desired pigmentation. It's really not too bad. It does take a little bit of practice, but I really enjoy it. I think it's fun and satisfying. Now we're just painting his shorts brown. And then his shirt is the same color as his cape, but just a little darker, so I mixed a little bit more pure black and brown with some azure blue to create this nice teal tone. Now I'm going in with some Dove Gray to paint the fur around his belt. Then I mixed Boulder, warm white, and brown together to create this color for his belt. Then for his staff, I mixed some pure black, titanium white, warm white, lemonade, and brown to get this nice grayish brown color. Then once that's dry, I dry brush it with some pure magenta and light blue, just like his hair. And we're just going to finish off the accessories. Just this is the rope, and then we're going to paint the leaves and the branches on those tiny little twigs. And then we're going to paint the base the same color as the background in the illustration. And I almost forgot to paint his eyebrows, so we're going to do that now with some Dove Gray. Then for the final step, I will be permanently attaching him to the base with some E6000 industrial adhesive. And he's done! Sculpt This episode 5 is complete. Let me know how you think I did bringing Snackodile's illustration to life in the comments, and then if you use any of the tips and techniques in this video on your own projects, share them to Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and tag me at AceOfClay or hashtag AceOfClay so I can check them out. And that's a wrap. I really hope you like how this guy came out. Let me know how you think I did in the comments. Thank you so much, Snackodile, for letting me bring him to life in 3D. And don't forget, join my Facebook group, Aces of Clay, and then follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Ace of Clay, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.